Most perennials in pots do not die in summer. They die in February, and the gardener never sees it happen. You put the pot away in November looking healthy, you come back to it in April, and there is nothing there. No rot, no obvious damage, just a pot of compost with a dead crown in the middle of it. And nearly everybody blames the plant or blames themselves for forgetting to water and buys a different one next spring. The plant was fine. The pot killed it. Here's what happened. In the ground, a root sits in a mass of soil that holds heat and freezes slowly, and only from the top. In a pot, that same root has cold air on all four sides and the bottom. A container freezes solid right through, and it thaws and it freezes again. And every one of those cycles tears the fine roots apart, which means the single most useful thing I can tell you before we get to the list is this. A plant is roughly 2 hardiness zones less hardy in a pot than it is in the ground. If you garden in zone 6, your pots are behaving like zone 8, so you buy for zone 4. Get that one idea and half your losses stop. I grew nursery stock in containers for 40 years, tens of thousands of pots a season, and every winter I lost some. You learn quickly which plants shrug at it and which never do. Those are the 12 I am giving you. There is one on this list that flowers better the more you neglect it, and I will name it 7th because it is the exact opposite of what people do to it. Before the plants, 2 rules that decide whether any of them work. The first is the compost, and this is where most people lose the plant before winter ever arrives. Do not use ordinary multipurpose potting compost for a perennial that is meant to stay put. That stuff is made for bedding plants and tomatoes, things that live one season. It is mostly organic matter, and organic matter breaks down. By the end of year 2, it has collapsed into a dense, airless sludge that holds water like a sponge and gives roots nothing to breathe. What you want is roughly 2 parts of a soil-based compost, the sort sold as John Innes No. 3, or as a loam-based potting soil, to 1 part coarse grit or perlite. The loam gives you body that does not rot away, and the grit keeps air in it. That mix will still be working in 5 years. For lavender and pinks, go further. Half grit. They want to be almost dry at the root. The second rule is drainage, and it is simpler than people make it. Every pot needs holes, and they need to be open. Do not put broken crocks or gravel in the bottom. Whatever you have read, that is an old piece of advice that turns out to be wrong. A layer of coarse material at the base actually raises the level at which water sits in the pot rather than lowering it. Fill the pot with your mix, top to bottom, and let the holes do their job. And get the pot up off the ground on feet or a couple of tiles. A pot sitting flat on a paved surface has its drainage holes sealed by the wet stone underneath it. In winter, that is the difference between a plant that lives and a plant that drowns. The third rule is the pot itself, and it matters more than people think. Size first. Go bigger than looks right. A bigger pot holds more compost. More compost holds more water and more warmth. And both of those are exactly what a perennial needs to get through a hot July and a cold January. A 14-inch pot is a reasonable minimum for anything on this list, and for the larger plants, you want 16 or more. Small pots are where perennials go to die, and they die faster in both directions, drying out in summer and freezing solid in winter. Material next. Terracotta is porous, so it breathes and it dries, which suits the lavender and pinks end of things and does not suit the Hosta and Astilbe end. It also cracks if water gets into the clay and freezes. So in cold regions, look for pots sold as frost-proof rather than frost-resistant. There is a real difference, and the word on the label tells you which you are buying. Glazed ceramic holds moisture much better and comes through winter well, and it is what I would use for anything that likes damp. Plastic is unfashionable and perfectly good. It holds water, it does not crack, and it weighs nothing when you come to move 9 pots against a wall in November. There is no shame in a plastic pot inside a nicer one. Depth beats width for most perennials. A tall pot gives roots somewhere to go down, and down is where they are safest when it turns cold. Right. 12 plants. First, lavender. Lavender in a pot is better than lavender in most gardens because you control the drainage completely, and drainage is the only thing it genuinely cares about. Half grit, half loam-based compost. Terracotta rather than plastic if you have the choice, because clay breathes and dries. full sun. Water it well when you plant it, and then very sparingly, and in winter, almost not at all. The mistake is kindness. People water lavender the way they water everything else, and it goes gray and woody at the base and thins out from the middle. That is not disease. That is a dry country plant kept wet. Trim it after flowering, taking off the spent stems and about an inch of the green growth beneath. Never cut into the brown wood. There are no buds in there, and it will not come back from it. Munstead and Hidcote are the two to buy for pots. Compact, hardy, and they have been sold for 100 years because they work. Second, Sedum, the upright sort, what used to be called autumn joy. This is the toughest thing on the list. Thick, fleshy leaves that store their own water, a root system that asks for nothing, and flower heads that go from pale green in July to dusty pink in September to deep russet by October. Then they stand there brown and architectural all winter with frost on them. Loam-based mix, a good handful of grit, full sun. Water it once a fortnight in summer and leave it alone the rest of the year. The mistake is overwatering, and with sedum, you can see it. The stems go floppy and splay open from the middle, leaving a bare hole in the center of the plant. People assume it needs feeding or staking. It needs less water and more sun. Leave the dead heads standing over winter. They protect the crown and they look well. Third, Heuchera. Coral bells. You grow these for the leaves, not the flowers, and in a pot that is exactly right because the pot brings the foliage up to where you can see it. Lime green, deep burgundy, amber, silver-veined purple. They hold their color most of the year. Part shade suits them best. Full sun scorches the pale ones, and deep shade makes the dark ones go muddy green. Here's the mistake, and it is one almost nobody knows about. Heuchera lift themselves. Every year, the crown rises a little further out of the compost, on a woody stem, until the plant is sitting proud with its roots in the air, and it starts looking thin and falling apart. That is not disease, and it is not the pot being too small. The fix takes 2 minutes. In spring, lift the plant, cut the old woody stem back so you have a couple of inches below the crown, and replant it deeper in fresh mix. It will root straight into the new compost. Do that every 2 or 3 years, and a Heuchera will outlast you. Fourth, Hosta, the best shade plant you can put in a pot, and in a pot it has one enormous advantage over one in the ground, which is that you can defend it. Slugs and snails destroy hostas. In a border, you are fighting a losing battle. On a pot, you have a rim you can put a copper band round, and you can stand the pot up off the ground, and suddenly the leaves stay whole all season. Shade or part shade, loam-based mix with plenty of body. The mistake is drying out. A hosta has a huge amount of leaf and it transpires hard, and a pot in July can go from damp to bone dry in a day. Once the leaves brown at the edges, they do not recover that season. Water it properly and often, and if it is somewhere hot, use a bigger pot than you think you need, because more compost means more buffer. Blue-leaved varieties hold their color better out of direct sun. Halcyon is the one I would buy. One more thing on hostas, since you have them in a pot and it is easy. Every third autumn, tip the plant out and cut the crown in half with a spade or an old bread knife, straight down through the middle. It looks violent and the plant does not care in the slightest. Repot one half, give the other away, and you have a tighter plant with fresh compost round it. A hosta left in the same pot for 6 years goes small-leaved and mean-looking, and people put that down to the variety when it is just congestion. Fifth, Daylily. Daylilies take container life better than almost any other flowering perennial. Thick storage roots, tolerant of heat and drought, and they flower for weeks. The mistake here is the pot size. People put a daylily in a 10-inch pot because that is what it came in, and within 2 seasons it has filled the whole thing with root and there is no compost left. It stops flowering and starts looking starved, and no amount of feeding fixes it, because the problem is that there is nowhere for water to sit. Give it a proper pot. 14 inches across at least, and deeper is better than wider. Then divide it every 3 years in early autumn. Tip the whole thing out, cut the clump into 2 or 3 pieces with a knife, cut the foliage back by half, and repot 1 piece in fresh mix. You will have plants to give away, and the parent will flower like it did the first year. Sixth, Catmint, Nepeta the walker's low sort, a gray-green haze of a plant covered in small lavender-blue flowers from May right through to the frost, and it spills over the edge of a pot the way very little else does. Full sun, gritty mix, hardly any water once established. Bees on it constantly. Deer and rabbits walk straight past it. The mistake is leaving it alone. Around midsummer, after the first flush, catmint goes leggy and flops open and looks finished. People pull it out at that point. What it wants is the shears. Cut the whole plant back by half, hard, all at once. It looks brutal for a week, and then it comes back tight and fresh and flowers again into October. Do that once a year, and it stays good for a decade. 7th, Agapanthus. The one I promised you, Agapanthus flowers better when it is pot-bound. That is not a tolerance, it is a preference. A plant with its roots packed tight in a container will throw up more of those blue globe flowers than the same plant with room to spread. So the mistake is the kindest thing a gardener can do, which is to notice the roots are crowded and move it into a bigger pot. Do that and you get 2 or 3 years of magnificent leaves and no flowers at all while it fills the new space. Leave it. Let it get so tight the pot bulges. Feed it in spring with something high in potash. Tomato feed does the job. And water it well through summer. Only repot when the pot is genuinely about to break, and then go up one size only. The deciduous types, the head-borne hybrids, are much hardier than the evergreen ones. In colder regions, that is what you want. 8th, sedge, carex, not a flowering plant, a structure plant, and every collection of pots needs one or it looks like a jumble. Evergreen, arching, and it holds through winter when everything else is gone. There is a bronze one, Carex comans, that looks like a wig of copper wire and reads beautifully against terracotta. Ice Dance is a green and white one for shade. Any decent mix, sun or part shade, and it wants a bit more moisture than the lavender crowd. The mistake is shearing it. People cut grasses down in spring by habit. Evergreen sedges do not want that, and a sedge cut to the ground often does not come back properly. What it wants is combing. Put a gloved hand in and pull the dead material out, like currying a horse. 2 minutes and the plant is clean for the year. 9th, pinks, dianthus, old cottage plants, blue-gray evergreen foliage in a neat mound and flowers in May and June that smell of cloves from several feet away. They want sun and sharp drainage, and unusually, they like lime. A handful of garden lime in the mix suits them, and they will do better in a limestone chip top dressing than a bark one, which is the mistake. Do not mulch pinks with bark or compost. They are alpine in habit, and anything soft and damp sitting against that gray foliage rots the neck of the plant. Gravel or grit right up to the stems is what they want, so water drains away from the crown instantly. Deadhead them properly after flowering, right down to a leaf joint, and you will often get a second showing in late summer. 10th, Bergenia, elephant's ears, an unfashionable plant, and I do not much care, because in a pot, it earns its place twice over. Enormous, glossy, leathery leaves that stay all winter and turn bronze and red in the cold, then thick stems of pink flowers in March when there is nothing else. It will grow in sun or deep shade, wet or dry, and it does not much mind which. There is very little you can do to kill it. The only job is tidiness. By late winter, some of the older leaves go brown and tatty at the edges. Pull them off, do not cut them, take hold at the base of the stalk and pull downward, and it comes away clean. If yours has spread across the pot and the middle has gone bare, lift it in autumn, cut off the outer rosettes with a bit of rhizome attached, and start again with those. 11th, Japanese forest grass, Heuchera, the best foliage plant for a shaded pot that I know of, and one I sold a great many of. It makes a low mound of arching gold and green blades that all fall the same direction, like water going over a step, and it moves in the slightest breeze. Shade or part shade. It wants moisture, more than most things here. So a loam-based mix with plenty of body and regular watering. Do not let it dry out in July. It is deciduous. It goes buff and straw-colored in autumn, stands like that through winter, and comes back in late spring, later than you expect. Every year somebody decides theirs has died in April and throws it out. Give it until the middle of May before you conclude anything. Cut the old growth off at the base in early spring, before the new shoots show. Areola is the gold and green one. It is slow, and it is worth waiting for. 12th, Astilbe. I have put this last because it is the fussiest thing on the list, and it is here for one reason, which is that if you have a shady, damp corner, nothing else gives you those feathered plumes in July. Pink, crimson, white, standing above ferny, dark foliage. In a pot, it is entirely doable. The mistake is treating it like the rest. Astilbe will not tolerate drying out. Not once, not for a day. A dry Astilbe gets crisp brown edges on every leaf and it does not recover until the following year. So stand the pot in a saucer, which is advice I would give for almost nothing else. Keep an inch of water in it through summer. Shade, rich mix with plenty of organic matter, and feed it in spring. Leave the dried plumes on over winter. They hold well and they look like nothing else with frost on them. Now, before we get to winter, the running of them through the year. It is not much, but it is not nothing. And this is the difference between pots that look good for one season and pots that look good for 5. Watering. The rule is the same as for anything in the ground, only more so. Water thoroughly and less often, rather than a splash every day. You want to see it run out of the bottom of the pot. A light watering wets the top inch and the roots below it stay dry. And worse, the roots come up looking for it and sit where the sun cooks them. Check with a finger rather than a glance. 2 inches down. Compost can look dark and damp on the surface and be dry as a bone underneath, particularly if it has shrunk away from the sides of the pot, in which case your water is running down the gap and straight out without wetting anything at all. If you see that gap, push the compost back against the sides with your thumbs before you water. Feeding. Once a year is enough for most of them. A handful of slow-release fertilizer worked into the top inch in April, and that is the job done. Anything that flowers heavily, the Daylily, the Agapanthus, the Astilbe, will take a liquid feed high in potash every fortnight through summer as well. Tomato feed. Same bottle, quarter the price of anything sold as flower food. Do not feed after the middle of August, same reason as everything else at that time of year. You will push soft growth that has no time to harden before the cold, and soft growth is what winter takes first. Topping up. Every spring, scrape an inch off the top of the pot and replace it with fresh mix. It refreshes the surface, buries any exposed crowns, and it takes about a minute a pot. Repotting. Every 3 or 4 years for most of these, tipped out in autumn, roots teased apart, back into fresh compost. The exception is the Agapanthus, which we have covered and which you leave alone. Now, the part that decides whether any of this lasts. Overwintering. Everything on that list is properly hardy in the ground. Remember the 2-zone rule. In a pot, the roots need help. 3 things in order of how much they matter. Group the pots together against a wall, ideally one that gets some sun. Pots in a cluster shelter each other and a house wall gives off heat all night. A pot standing alone in the open is the one you lose. Wrap the pot, not the plant. Bubble wrap, hessian, old compost bags, straw packed round the outside. You are insulating the root ball. The top growth can look after itself. This is the step people skip, and it is the one that works. Get them out of the wet. A frozen root ball is survivable. A saturated frozen root ball is not, because the water expands and there is nowhere for it to go. Pot feet, under an eave, anywhere the winter rain is not landing straight in. I know the cost of getting this wrong. December of 1983, I was still working with my father. It came in hard and it stayed, and it took most of the orchard with it. The trees that had shelter lived, the ones standing out in the open on the exposed side did not, and we spent the next 3 years grafting the place back together from the wood that survived. Nothing in a pot on your patio is an orchard, but it is the same lesson in miniature, and I have never once forgotten it. Cold does not kill evenly. It kills what is exposed. Move the pots. It takes 20 minutes in November. So one thing to take away. Buy 2 zones hardier than you think you need. Put them in a loam-based mix with grit in it and shove the pots together against the house before Christmas. Do those 3 and every plant on this list will still be there in 5 years. And if you are starting from nothing, do not buy 12. Buy 3. A lavender for the sun, a Heuchera for the color, a sedge for the shape, in 3 pots of different heights stood together. That grouping will look better than 12 pots dotted about singly. It will winter better because they shelter each other, and you will actually keep on top of the watering. Add to it next year when you know what your patio does in July. Tell me in the comments what you have got in pots and what has died on you, because I would wager a good number of you lost it in February and blamed July. A pot is not a small garden. It is a plant with no coat on. If you want more plain speaking advice on growing plants that last in pots, subscribe to Old Amos.